Okay, this is just a little uploaded video to talk about airspace. It occurs to me that I'm often talking about airspace in the streams, and I talk about Bravo airspace and Delta airspace and Charlie airspace, and while there are more types of airspace than that. One that's three that are important for us are Delta, Charlie, and Bravo, and I sort of just use the terminology offhanded. And if you're a pilot or if you're a student pilot, you know what those things mean. But if you're just watching, or maybe you're an enthusiast, it might be confusing. So I thought I'd just have a second here, a quick uploaded video to talk about it. I'm not going to go through all the differences. If you want to learn all the differences, I've got some resources for you. But I'll kind of talk through the three things or the four things that make these airspaces different, how you see them on the charts, and just a little background context for people who might want to be learning more about this stuff. Okay, so the U.S. National Airspace System is divided into lots of different types of airspace that have different rules and restrictions for how you need to operate depending on the type of airspace that you're in. The Aircraft Information or Airman's Information Manual, AIM, is online. You can buy it as a book. It's a very thick book. It's not too expensive, but it's online, and you can certainly see everything that you want to learn about online just by going to the FAA's website. This is the page for controlled airspace, meaning that there is air traffic control working the airspace. And there's three different controlled airspaces around airports that we want to talk about: B, Bravo, C, Charlie, and D, Delta. And they have different space limits in terms of lateral and vertical territory in the air, in the sky, where air traffic control expects you to do certain things and behave in a certain way. The point of these airspaces is to keep airplanes from running into each other. Certainly for our busiest airports, you need to have lots of restrictions about where people can fly. You just can't let people fly anywhere they want around a big airport. Bad things will happen. And then for medium-sized and small airports, same thing. Having the tower or having air traffic control either be able to see you or see you on radar is important for separation between aircraft. And that's what these different airspaces are meant to do. Class B is around the biggest airports in the United States. Think LaGuardia, think LAX, think Tampa, which we'll look at here in a second. Class C is for airports that are not quite as large. They have some commercial air traffic, probably a lot of turbine stuff coming in and out. Sarasota is one of those that's like that here in the Tampa area, which we'll look at in a second. And then Class Delta are airports that might have a control tower. They all have a control tower, otherwise they wouldn't be Class Delta. And they have lots of GA traffic and maybe some turbine aircraft coming and going. Probably very little or limited commercial air service, although it does happen, as we'll see here in a second. And not as much traffic. B, Bravo, is the most restrictive. D, Delta, is the least restrictive. And they have different limitations or altitudes of space that they take up laterally and vertically in the sky, where you are in the airspace that's considered controlled. They look like upside down wedding cakes, as you can see. Class Bs are always have multiple tiers to them. They are rarely actually 3 cylinders, as you see here. Class Cs, Charlies, are almost always 2 cylinders, and Ds are almost always 1 cylinder. Also, they're of different widths, as you can see. The Class B goes up to 10,000 feet AGL usually, and lateral 30 miles in a cylinder at the top tier. That would be called a shelf. If I move my mouse here, you can see here's 3 shelves in the Bravo, 2 shelves in the Charlie, and just 1 shelf in the Delta. Ds are more narrow, Cs are a little bit in between. And I'll show them to you here on the map, and then we'll talk about sort of what they mean. If we look over at, this is the VFR chart for Tampa, we can see lots of different types of airports and air-controlled airspace here. First of all, you can see the Bravo airspace around Tampa International. Tampa International is in the center. And you can see this ring. All Bravos have this ring around them that's a 30-mile ring. And inside that, you have to be not only on the radio talking air traffic, not only on the radio, but also have a transponder that works and that conveys your altitude. So you need to be squawking altitude, we would say. Otherwise, you can't go within that veil, even if you're not in the airspace. I'll turn the airspaces on here with this outliner tool. So even if I'm flying through here, I'm not in the Tampa Bravo shelf. I'm outside this blue line, but I'm within the 30 nautical mile veil. And it means I need to be have the setting of my transponder for what's called mode C. You can see mode C 30 nautical miles here. That basically means letting them know what my altitude is. Within that veil, different Bravos have different dimensions and proportions, but this is basically a top-down view of the Tampa wedding cake. And you can see different altitudes for the shelves of the controlled airspace here. So this over here, it's between 6,000 and 10,000 feet. Over here, it's between 3,000 and 10,000 feet. And the main thing is that the shelves are most restrictive on whatever alignment most arrivals and departures would be taking. So in Tampa, airplanes are taking off north or south and landing north or south. And so as you can see here, over here, the shelf is 6,000 to 10,000 feet. Whereas if I just move directly laterally, it's actually 3,000 to 10,000 feet. That's because airplanes are descending through here. So if you look at how these things might look in 3D space, like this is a delta view here, thanks to Pilot Institute for this graphic. You can see here that, I can't tell what airport this is, but there's more restriction along this axis because airplanes are clearly departing and taking off east-west here. And there's less restriction going this way. So part of the challenge is being able to visualize these things in your head because they all have this sort of set of 3D shape to them. This is a Bravo. This is a Charlie, two Charlies here, actually, in the Los Angeles area. And you can see the different dimensions of their airspace, which again relates kind of to where traffic is coming and going. We also have some deltas here that you can see that are adjoining each other. This is the general Los Angeles area. LAX is up here, but its Bravo isn't on the chart. So, or in this graphic. So the whole idea is to kind of protect airplanes that are coming and going. And if you don't have these rings or ForeFlight, you can read the shelf limits on the chart because they will have these numbers like this with the line. So 10,000 to 1,200 feet is the restricted airspace here. Here it's 10,000 down to the surface. Up here it's 10,000 to 3,000 feet, which means if you're plugging along at 2,500 feet, you can fly right through here underneath this Bravo shelf. So you can fly under the shelves, you can fly over the shelves, but the key thing about Bravo airspace is you can't fly into it unless you have permission to do so as a VFR pilot. Everything I'm talking about today is for VFR. IFR, you've got an instrument flight plan, you're talking to air traffic control, you're a completely controlled aircraft, you're going only where they tell you to go. You don't have to worry about any of this. But if you're VFR, the key thing about Bravo airspace is, number one, you have to be a private pilot to fly into it, or you have to be with an instructor who's the pilot in command. Number two, you cannot enter the Bravo airspace unless you have permission to do so from that controller. And it is against the regulations to do otherwise. And number three, you have to have a working radio and a transponder, and you have to have mode C so you can squawk altitude. Those things are true. You can fly into the Bravo. It is not unusual to be denied entry into a Bravo. It was quite common for me when I would be flying to take off from St. Petersburg, fly out here to the coast, come up, and then want to make this transition here and ask to enter the Bravo for this transition and be denied. And why would they do that? They're too busy, too much air traffic. It's a hassle. They're understaffed. And so you're out of luck. So I'd fly up north. I'd go down to 2,500 feet, and then I would scoot along through here until I was past the Bravo, and then I'd be cleared to ascend to whatever altitude I wanted. So that's Bravos. You need permission to enter. If you're VFR, you need to have a mode C squawking altitude on the transponder. And once you're in the Bravo, you are a controlled aircraft. They definitely will not let you wander around. They'll want to know where you're going, and very often will give you vectors to tell you what they want to do and give you very specific transition routes. You can't just fly around wherever you want inside of Bravo airspace. So that basically is Bravos. There's more to it than that, and there's certain weather limits inside of Bravo, clear of clouds and the rest, but I'm going to dispense with that for this. Charlie's, we also have Charlie down here. So I mentioned Sarasota. Down here at Sarasota, you can see Charlie. Charlie are magenta on the charts. So it's this kind of red color. Here's Sarasota. And almost always 2 cylinders for the Charlie. One cylinder is closer in. It's, I think, 10 miles across, something like that. Maybe 5 miles across. And here we can see surface to 4,000 feet. And then over here, it's 1,200 to 4,000 feet. I used to come up here at 5,000 feet, be under the Bravo here, and fly directly over the Sarasota Charlie with no problem, heading down south to Venice or someplace like that. So you can fly directly over it, which is fine. Here you can see it actually cuts into the Delta for Tampa. And to go into the Charlie, you have to be talking to the controller before you get there, and you need to, they need to be talking back to you. They don't grant you permission. You have to be in communication. So you can see here it says contact Tampa approach within 20 nautical miles. So basically they're saying if you're going to be coming into, and it's, see how it's got the red square around it? That means it's for this Charlie. It's not for the Delta. This is for the Bravo. This is for the Bravo up here. But this basically says, you know, contact Tampa approach within 20 nautical miles of Sarasota. And that's the controller that's working this airspace. And you would say to them, you know, we're going to be transiting the Sarasota Charlie airspace. And as long as they read your call sign back to you, so if I'd said Sierra 15 Juliet Golf, I'm going to be passing through Sarasota, they would, if they talk back to you, you're in communication and you can go in. You don't, or you're not granted approval to enter or denied entry. You also need to be squawking mode C to go into a Charlie, and having, you know, a transponder with a radio. And very often in a Charlie, they'll give you vectors. They'll want to control you because of arrival traffic, but they can't keep you from going out. Now, what they can do is just ignore you. So if you're not talking to air traffic control, if you've called them and they've ignored you, you can't go in. But say I am on I've got flight following and I'm cruising along here and I'm talking to Tampa approach already, and I come up and I fly right through this Charlie without ever talking to Sarasota, that's okay because I'm talking to air traffic control, the controlling radar environment over the top of it. So that would be considered me having, you know, being within regulations to cross into the Charlie airspace. And then finally we have deltas. There are a lot of deltas around here. Here's a delta, St. Pete, Whitted. We've got PIE, which is up here. Deltas have this dotted line around them. Lakeland over here is a delta. And deltas basically are, we can see we've got a delta here. Deltas basically are controlled airspace. They've got a control tower. They may or may not have radar services. Charlies have radar, meaning they've got a radar on the tower. They can see you. Deltas may not have radar. St. Petersburg, for example, does not have radar. Albert Whitted. I can see that it's the top of the shelf is 1,200. 1,500 feet over here. It's 1,200 over here. It's a little lower because of the Bravo on top of it. If we go over to Lakeland, we can see the top of the delta is 2,600 feet. Usually it's about 2,500 feet, 2,600 feet, top of deltas. This one over here is 1,600. So basically it's a cylinder, just a direct cylinder like this, and it has a top limit to it, and you need to be in radio communication with them to fly through. Usually, unlike a Charlie where they will have a departure or approach controller that you need to call before you get there, for deltas, you're just calling the tower. And so for Whitted, let's say we're flying along here under the Bravo shelf and we're at 2,500 feet and we want to come into Whitted. Once we get about St. Pete Beach, we would call them and say that we're inbound for full stop. And as long as we hear our call sign back to us, they say Sirius 15 Juliet Golf, they might give us direction, you know, proceed direct or, you know, plan on runway 27, whatever it might be. I can go ahead and enter that Delta airspace. I can't fly through the Delta airspace without being in communication with that control tower. But it doesn't mean I have radar. It doesn't mean that there's radar services. So you don't need a transponder to go into a delta, and you certainly don't need to be squawking mode C, but you do need a working radio to go into a delta. So if you don't have a radio, you can't fly in a delta airspace. And once you're talking to them, you can, proceed through and transition. So I would just call and say, hey, we're going to transition to delta, and they might give us some directions, but they might just say, fly, fine, head on through. And they might be looking at me with binoculars, since like Witted there, they don't have a radar services, so they would just be looking at us with binoculars and trying to track us by sight. You can see how this is pretty complicated here. It's Witted. It's got airspace up to 1,500, and then you're underneath this shelf, which is 30,000. So actually, there's an element here where you're between 15 and 3,000, where you're actually not in their airspace. And anyway, just the bottom line is, if you're anywhere near to one of these places, it's good to be talking to them. Tell them what you're doing, tell them where you're going to go, and the rest, especially when the airspace is as complex as it is here in Tampa. I mean, within just a few miles of each other, you've got MacDill Air Force Base, which is a Delta. You've got Tampa, which is a Bravo. You got PIE, which is a Delta. You've got Albert Whitted, which is a Delta. You go across the bay, you got Sarasota, which is a Charlie. There's a lot going on. So all the Bravos have different shapes. If we look at LAX, you can see, look at that, all kinds of controlled airspace around LAX. Some of these are arrival routes that are coming in, but the main Bravo for LAX is, it's not a circle at all. It's this weird angular shape. It comes way out here where it's 10,000 to 8,000, 10,000, 5,000. And since they arrive and land north or east-west here, you can see here it's only 2,000 to 10,000. This is 10,000 to surface. And here it's 10,000 to 2,000. Here it's 10,000 to 2,500. That's like complicated. Out here it's 10,000 to 9,000. But you start having a lot of stuff going on with the Bravo airspace. And I mentioned it on the stream the other day, but because Bravos are difficult to get through and around if you veer off traffic, a lot of them have what are called transition routes. You can see these magenta arrows. These are transition routes to get you north-south through the Los Angeles Bravo. And you can see the descriptions for the routes on the chart. For the mini route, which is this one here, the coastal route, which is this one here. This over here is the Hollywood Park route. The inset on the chart will have the requirements for how to fly that. We'll see if we can. The insets aren't included here in ForeFlight, so I can't show them to you. But if I go to Salt Lake City, hoping it would take me right to it, but it's not. I'll just move over to it. If we go up to Salt Lake and look at it, so it has transition routes and it has these boxes that explain the transitions. So this is the barn transition, eastbound from the barn waypoint over the approach end of runway 16 right and 17, westbound over the approach end of runway 17 and 16 right to the barn. So if I were over here flying around Antelope Island and I wanted to fly over here, I would call Salt Lake City and tell them before I enter the Bravo that I'd like to make the barn transition to the I-15 transition, which is this one here, to head south. And then if they gave me approval, I need to fly exactly that route, and they will assign an altitude to do it. And usually they give a couple thousand feet separation for people going north versus people going south. You can see here it says 6,000 MSL to 75 MSL is assigned by ATC. So if you're flying the I-15 transition, which is this transition over here, they would say, fly 6,000 if I'm heading south. They'd say fly 75 if I'm flying north. And that keeps us from running into each other. So that's a little bit on airspace. Again, the main things to know as a flight simulation enthusiast is Bravos are the most restrictive. They don't have the same shelf levels around the entire circle. Again, here's Salt Lake City. It doesn't even, over here on the mountains, there is no shelf at all. Like, you can fly around over here all you want because there's no arrival or departure traffic coming to Salt Lake City from the east-west like this. Everything comes down here and up, or it funnels up here and down. But along this route, it goes from 9,000 down to 6,000, down to the ground, to 6,000, to 7,500, to 9,000. Over here it's 7,800. Over here it's 8,600. All meant to keep you from bumping into big commercial air traffic. And you got to have a radio, you got to have a transponder, you got to be squawking mode C, and you need to be given granted approval to fly in. And then once you're in, you go and do exactly what the controller tells you to do. Charlie's, I don't have a Charlie here handy, but for Charlie Airspaces, again, they're radar services. You need to be talking to the approach or departure controller. It'll be on the chart who you contact before you get to them. And as long as they read back your call sign, you're considered to be in communication with ATC. You can go ahead and fly in or through. They may or may not give you vectors or tell you where they want you to go. And then for deltas, you just need a working radio, and you need to be in two-way communication with them before you fly in or out. And they may not have radar at all. They might just be using binoculars. In any of these scenarios, the person you're talking to could tell you something they want you to do. But the key thing is you have to stay out of the Bravo unless you're granted explicit permission to get into it. You can be talking to air traffic control, and that doesn't count. They need to say you're allowed to enter the Bravo. And then for the other two, as long as you're in communication and they've given you your call sign back, you can go ahead and fly in. They don't need to expressly say that you have permission to go into the Charlie or the Delta. So that's a little bit on airspace. The AIM is a really great resource, not hard to read. There's a bunch of websites and YouTube videos and stuff explaining all this stuff. Probably better than I've done here, but I know I've got people who watch the stream, and I'm always tossing around Bravo, Charlie, and Delta, and I've probably never explained very much what they mean. So that's just a quick explanation, and I hope it's helpful. And thanks for watching on the Glide Slope.